All right, so today we're doing 1648 to 1815, period 2. Can anyone tell me why 1815 is the end date for this time period? What does that date signify?
Napoleon's death?
Nope, close.
1815
We don't
is.
really care when he dies. We care when he,
That's when the French Revolution ends.
yeah, depending on your interpretation, it's when the Napoleonic Wars end.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's the Battle of Waterloo, the 100 Days ends, all that good stuff. So that's what that is. So it's the end of Napoleon and his time in power, and then the conservative era that starts this time period 3, which of course we'll do next week. So we're going to run kind of broadly through the study guide. I'll hit the high points. We're not going to hit details. Again, doing one DVQ, there's no need for tons of details. It's really not what we need to focus on at this time. So 3.2 in your study guide talks about the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution. So we'll start there because we also ended there last time. We know the English Civil War is fought between those that support the king and his belief in absolute power, Charles I, and the Roundheads, as they're called because they're Puritans with sweet bowl haircuts. They believe that Parliament should have more authority, and so that's the nature of the conflict. It has already started before 1648. It ends in 1649 with, of course, the death of Charles I. He gets his head chopped off. So that's not good. And what follows is, in theory, a non-royal time. We have a republic. But Oliver Cromwell, the leader of Britain or of England during this time, is everything but in name a monarch. He sits on a throne. He lives in former royal palaces. He has absolute authority to do what he wants. He doesn't listen to Parliament very much either, much like his predecessor. Whenever he dies in 1658, his son replaces him. So it sounds a whole lot like a monarchy. But except for he's a Puritan, so we know that means he bans pretty much anything recreational. So theaters are closed. Fighting, boxing, animal fights, that kind of stuff are closed. Parks, recreation. They basically try to cancel Christmas because they don't believe it's literally in the Bible. Hey, Logan. So therefore, there's no need for any of that. So it's not a fun time. And as you know, after wars, oftentimes we struggle economically because we've lost a lot of economic capacity. And we have to build that back up, as we certainly understand during this time. So it's not a good structure. And then the guy that replaces Cromwell eventually is going to be the oldest son of the previous monarch, Charles I. Both the sons of Charles have been living in Europe for a couple years, obviously not wanting to be killed themselves. They are brought back to the country. We don't get into all the details of that really, but the concern is again over religion, even 140 years after Henry VIII. So Charles II, there's a rumor he's a secretive Catholic. His brother James II is an outright Catholic. And what starts all of this glorious revolution is that James has a Catholic son. So when that infant is born, we know we now have the potential for a Catholic dynasty. We're very concerned about that. And so some nobles secretly reach out to the Netherlands, where the oldest daughter of James has been living, Mary. Mary was born to a previous wife at an earlier time, and she is a Protestant, and her husband, William of Orange of the Netherlands, is a Protestant. So basically what happens is that the nobles make a deal. Y'all can come on into England. You will be crowned the monarchs. We will not fight you. However, in exchange for this glorious gift, you are going to have to give up some power. You're going to have to give us more autonomy in Parliament. We're going to meet when we want to meet. We're going to have more authority than just finances, blah, 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 blah. And this, of course, is the English Bill of Rights, which is the primary document of the so-called Glorious Revolution. This is the beginning, main event of constitutional monarchy, where we have a king or queen, but they share power. And then, of course, over the next 100, 150 years, Parliament takes power. And by the time we get to the reign of George III in the 19th century, when he starts to have mental challenges and is no longer cogent to make decisions, it is decided that we should take away power from the monarchy. And by the time we get Queen Victoria in our third time period, she is but a figurehead. She cannot change laws. She cannot, take us to war, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, that's the status that almost every monarchy in the world is today, is a constitutional monarchy. And this takes place in the context of the early days of the Enlightenment. We'll come back to that later, but this is John Locke in his time period when he's writing about a lot of the freedoms that we'll try to have in the 17th and 18th centuries. So that's the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution. Any questions from anybody? We all good? All right, lovely. Moving on, we go to 3.3. We're looking at economics. And so we look at a couple major changes that happen in this time period economically. First off, in Great Britain in the late 17th century, at that time they're still England, sorry, we have the agricultural revolution, a movement to improve our agricultural yields. It is side by side with the scientific revolution, which we'll come to a little bit later. We're starting to develop better agricultural techniques, things like crop rotation, inventions like the seed drill, basic knowledge that we should not randomly scatter our crops, but plant them in specific rows and space them out and cover them up. And those ideas are laughed at the beginning, but eventually the farmers that have engaged with those ideas are highly successful. They're producing more food than ever before. They need less workers because of these machines. So many of us in the countryside are looking for work and move to cities, which again will lead to the Industrial Revolution in the next unit for the most part. Okay, we also know that traditionally agriculture in Europe was done by communal ownership, a lot of in feudalism. When that legacy starts to end, a lot of us owned farms together in our villages. So we have village land, and you plant crops here and I plant crops here, and there's not a lot of organization. And the science now tells us if we have organized farming with rows and structure, we will produce a lot more food. So what we do is we pass laws because, of course, most members of parliament are rich people, and this will benefit them. These laws are called the Enclosure Acts, and they take away traditional village-held farming, make it privately held, and then we build, in America, we build fences or put barbed wire around it. In Britain, they put shrubs. They're called hedgerows, and they organize the fields into organized strips of farming. And this will absolutely improve their agricultural yield. They definitely grow more food than ever before. However, the profits from this are all going to the rich and powerful. And that's the big complaint, clearly, if you're an average person. Yes, you have more food, but you've had your livelihood taken away. And so the poor, as always, are going to suffer from these changes because they don't have the ability to help be involved in the decision making. So we definitely see that. We also see during this time period what's called the price or commercial revolution, as we start to mass import goods from the New World, and then we start to grow some of those goods ourselves in Europe. We have a flood of new economic opportunity. However, that means prices go up. There's inflation across the continent. And so what that tends to do, of course, is hurt those of us that are the poorest living on the margins. Right now, you see currently with the economic challenges we have, there are loans given out to like critical industries that are in distress, like hotels and airlines, but it's small businesses. And what we're seeing the last day or two is, I know shockingly enough, some people have gotten some of those small business loans who probably didn't need it. And it's starting to come out that there are literally businesses that are one store or one restaurant that have 20 employees that are struggling to survive. And you've got people with 25 restaurants with thousands of employees who are taking that money. So there's always a debate on who that is. But anytime there's economic distress, those of us at the bottom are going to suffer the most. Those of us who live paycheck to paycheck, those of us who are, restaurant staffs or tattoo artists or, hair salon people who are struggling to survive right now because those businesses are closed and we don't know when they're going to reopen. So those are concerns, obviously, that were true today. They're also true back in the 18th century with the changes from all that mass importation. The inflation hurts those of us at the bottom of the economy. As prices go up, I struggle to feed my family. I struggle to pay my rent. I struggle to have basic needs covered during times of economic distress. And that was true then, it's true now. The big things we want to talk about are two, and that would be, of course, the economic philosophies of mercantilism and capitalism. So mercantilism is the primary economic system for most of the time period we're in currently, time period 2. And then we start to see capitalism at the end, and then it has become the predominant over the last 200 years. So let's remind ourselves of the basics of mercantilism. Now, it's been a while, but can any of you remind me of something that is an element of mercantilism, a basic belief system, structure to mercantilism?
They believe like there's a finite number of resources and you want the most.
Okay, awesome. I'm taking a picture so I have attendance later because I haven't printed out my new roster yet. So that's absolutely true, Mason. Do we know what ideas what particular things are most valuable to them? What materials do they want to get a hold of?
Gold and silver.
Perfectly. Good. Gold and silver. Correct. So we want access to gold and silver. We also know there's a finite supply, as Mason said. So every bar of gold or silver that I get, my rivals don't get. So I get richer while they get poorer. which is a nice thing for me. What will we do to try to get access to these materials? What are some of the strategies we undertake to try to maximize our profits and get access to this gold and silver around the world?
Start colonies.
Absolutely. Excellent, Quillen. So colonizing, and then also to maximize our profits, what do we do in terms of labor?
Slavery?
Yes. So if we are not paying much for supplies and we're not paying much for labor, what happens to our profits in these endeavors?
It goes up.
Not just, they go way up. So we're massively increasing our profit, which is why this is the system that is undertaken. The governments definitely help and definitely improve their economic status. The rich and powerful improve theirs. We see a growing lifestyle of people like merchants. Absolutely. Does the average person in a European society see great benefit from a lot of these changes? No, not really. And that's the primary complaint people have when we see the rise of capitalism, is that in theory, capitalism promises economic opportunity for everybody, and mercantilism is a very small slice of the pie. Now, you can debate whether you think that's true of capitalism or not, but that's the argument that is made when it is created in the late 18th century. Okay, so that's the broad strokes of mercantilism. Everybody feel okay with that? Again, you have all these notes, and you're welcome to look back at some point if you'd like. Capitalism. So 1776, The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, Scottish philosopher. Adam Smith says, no, it is not gold and silver. It is any commodity or service that people will pay for. Again, what is something worth? What someone will pay you for it. Who decides that worth?
The market?
Yeah, the market, which is made up of who?
People?
Yeah, us. So we might think something is stupid. When I was a kid in the 80s and the early 90s, there was a big fad of having pet rocks. Literally a rock that you bought in a container, and then it was your pet. I'd go get a rock outside right now, and people paid like $10 for this. Stupid. But it became a thing, and so people did it. It was insane. My dad, who is 72, still cannot get over that my niece, who is 18, wears jeans with holes in it. He just doesn't understand. He's like, sweetheart, next time you want, I've got money. I'll buy you a pair of jeans that are, don't have holes in them, that kind of thing. And of course, my niece goes, oh. So styles change. My generation, we tight rolled our jeans, or you had those Jankies or Jangos, I can't remember what they were called, like the skateboarding pants that were literally, you could fit two people inside of them. They look ridiculous. They were awful. But for about 2 years, when I was in middle school and early high school, those were popular. I even asked my mom for a pair of one, and thank God it went out of fashion, and thank God she had the sense to tell me no. But I even wanted one of those because my friends were wearing them and they were cool. Oh my God. Ask your parents about Jenkos if they're between late 30s and early 40s or mid 40s. That's something they may remember. And it could be Jengos, but I think it's Jenkos. But they're like these giant, and like skateboarders wore them. And of course, there was like 3 kids in my school that skateboarded, but it was cool. So anyway, the market determines what is cool and what is valuable, not the government. Laissez-faire, the French term for leave alone, means the government should stay out of it. Basically, Adam Smith said we should collect a little bit of tax, not much. We should have a military that have common defense, and the rest of it, you're on your own. If your business goes out of business, And as you know, we don't fully practice that. Ever since the Great Depression, we believed in much more government engagement, and even more than that before. And we're seeing that right now. I was just talking about the aid package that was passed a couple weeks ago by the federal government. That clearly is not laissez-faire, sending checks to people or small business loans or bailing out the airline industry or whatever. That is absolutely not laissez-faire, but we haven't operated under that really since the Great Depression. So does that make sense to everybody, the broad strokes of capitalism? You've lived under it your entire life. You understand supply and demand, competition, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now, let's get to the early days of industrialization. We're not going to get into too much of it because that's the next time period, but we know we start seeing factories in the 1780s and 1790s. Most farmers in non-growing seasons would make clothes or make textiles by hand. They would get some wool or other fabrics from a merchant. They would be given the winter 3, 4, 5 months, depending on where you lived, to sew and put together things, and they would pick it up and pay you for it. And that's how your family survived in the cold winter months, as well as getting ready for the harvest. So that's basically how that works. So long story short, that is the process. The early industrial factories, Manchester, England in the 1780s, are making textiles, clothing. So this is a direct challenge to those putting out systems. And a lot of people were angry about it. We had people break into factories and try to destroy early machines. Anytime you improve technology, it's those of us on the bottom of the economic system, they're going to suffer the most. Again, a lot of us, you see the protests the last couple of days about the various shutdown measures, people wanting to open the economy up. I think we can all sympathize with that. But those people aren't CEOs. They're not leaders of major corporations. They're small business owners, and other people who are worried about their livelihood. Totally get it. But I would argue they're not being rational. But that's neither here nor there. But that's how that works. So that the early industrial system is going to happen. We if you remember, one day in the fall we had a discussion. Why is England the first nation? And we got a list of about 20, 25 items. We got down to about a top 5, and we've talked about all those. That could be something you're asked to do, because I could certainly see a DBQ about the evolution of economics across modern Europe. That's something they could ask you about. Who knows? But that is something that certainly could be it. All right. 3.4 gets into all the stuff we already talked about. By the way, what are the number one products we're getting out of the New World in Europe? That is, what are the great benefits of mercantilism in Europe?
You get sugar.
Sugar, absolutely. And what metal is most mined? You
Gold
mentioned
or
it earlier.
silver?
Not gold, silver. Absolutely. Silver
Yeah.
and sugar are the number one things. All right, cool. Next up, 3.5. We mentioned this briefly last week. We have an overlap between time periods 1 and 2 of the so-called Dutch Golden Age, when they're going to make lots of money from shipping around the world, especially silver going from European nations to China. We know they have a great and vibrant artistic culture. We know they are going to see great growth in their economy. They are tolerant of different people, and so different groups, as they are going to be removed from their own societies, Huguenots in France, Jews in Spain, etc., are going to move to the Netherlands. The Netherlands will see the world's first stock market. They have the world's biggest company, the Dutch East India Company, and so they're going to be an amazingly profitable society for about 100, 150 years. And then their challenge is bigger nations just eventually are going to bully and push them away. Like the British and the French, who have more people, have bigger armies, et cetera, are going to take more involvement in that. But the Netherlands still holds on to Indonesia till the 1950s. So definitely they will have colonies for a long, long time. All right, let's move on to then the political developments of this time period. The number one political ideology during 1648 to 1815 is absolutism, absolute monarchy. Sometimes this is called the age of absolutism because we got the OGs of absolutism during this time period. Can anyone name me a major European absolute monarch?
Louis the 14th.
Louis the 14th, excellent, Taylor. Good, in France. Can I get one more, please? A ruler from this time. Maybe they're called the Great. There are several greats.
Is it Catherine the Great?
Catherine the Great is during this time period. Yep.
Okay.
Her predecessor, though, in Russia?
Peter?
Peter the Great, yeah. We've got Frederick the Great of Prussia. We've got Maria Theresa of Austria. So we have quite a few examples. So let's run through each of the big states briefly. We know the Dutch are a federal republic. Again, America borrows our political system from them, where we have multiple levels of government, and those priorities are shared. We're having that discussion right now, a lot in the news, as we have a discussion and blame hurtled at different levels of government on who's responsible for this or that. That's because of federalism. And so sometimes it is murky, to be honest. As you may know, the 10th Amendment in the United States Bill of Rights says anything not in this document to the federal government is to the states. So, and we've had that interpreted by the courts and legislators over the years, but that's pretty much how that works. Britain, of course, is going to be a constitutional monarchy, but everybody else is basically a absolute monarchy. So let's start with France, Louis XIV. As you may remember, l'état c'est moi, I am the state. Nothing happens in France really without his approval or without his support. Everything is around his involvement. Why was he, what are some of the excesses of his time as leader. You may remember we had a trial some of you participated in, and we tried him for 3 things. Do you remember what maybe a couple of those are? What were we upset about with him?
One of them was his palace. It was like too big.
So the Palace of Versailles, therefore, what's the complaint?
He took money out of like the federal bank or like their own money to build his own palace.
Yeah, so we're spending 25% of national funds for a palace for the monarch and the nobles to live in. What about people starving to death? Now, if you had extra money, sure, I don't care what you spend it on. Like, if you go on 10 vacations a year and you can afford it, good for you. But if you're going on 10 vacations a year and you have to borrow money to go on 6 of them, maybe cut back on the vacations, So that would be some kind of logic to that. Good. What else?
He's like wrongly discriminating against the Huguenots.
Oh my gosh, he's discriminating against those poor Protestants that his grandfather, Henry IV, had allowed to worship. And he tells them basically, you are going to be converting or leaving, or bad things will happen, like your murder. So the Huguenots will leave, and many of them will go to places like the United States or the American colonies or Great Britain or the Netherlands, for example. And then there was one more that Louis also likes to do, which when you think of absolutism, you think of this as the extension of that belief. How do you show that you're a dominant power?
Like a huge military.
Yeah, Logan. So yeah, what do we do a lot of?
Misusing it for our
Yeah.
own personal.
Yeah, exactly. Good job, Logan. So we fight a lot of wars, and some of them are pretty shady. It's just Louis grabbing for power. Probably the most famous is the one at the end of his life, the War of Spanish Succession. The leader of Spain, of the Habsburg family, we've inbred for hundreds of years. He's not able to reproduce and help have a child, so therefore he's done. Louis wants to put his grandson on the throne. A lot of us are concerned that would lead to basically a fraying situation, and we don't want that. We're afraid of that being too much power for Louis, so we go to a big old war, and Louis actually dies in the middle of it, and it does not happen where he puts his grandson on the throne, and he doesn't get to have that influence. So my new washer and dryer is very loud. Good to know. So that's much louder than the old one. That is part of that issue, is that he's always wasting money. He's doing things for himself, for his family, not for the good of the country. Of course, his argument is, I am the state, so whatever I do is good for my people as well. Yeah, but that's the time period we live in. All right, somebody mentioned Catherine and then Peter the Great, so let's move to Russia. Russia, of course, has gotten rid of Mongol authority. They have struggled to get involved in trade. They're not going to have the big changes that we see in Western Europe, like Renaissance, Reformation, etc., because they don't have the cultural influences. They don't have the wealth to support it. So we come along with Peter the Great, who takes over in 1682 and will rule until 1725. And Peter the Great acknowledges that Russia's terrible. They're awful. And he says we got to do something to fix that. So he wants to construct a new capital city, St. Petersburg. He wants it to look like the West. It looks like Baroque architecture and culture. He tells his nobles they have to dress like Westerners. They have to shave off their beards. Women got to wear big powdered wigs and all that good stuff. Then we got to get a navy. We've got to get aggressive militarily. We've got to physically move our empire west and south. We're going to go for the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea so we get close to the other Europeans. We are surrounded by water, but it's frozen in the Arctic, so that doesn't help us. Warm water ports is always one of those phrases we want to do. And then we want to improve our government. We want to be more efficient. We want to have less control of the nobles. We want to have less control of the church. We want to have more control of an efficient, streamlined government. So he creates basically the presidential cabinet. Even though he's a dictator, he still has advisors. And instead of advising him on everything, they advise him on one specific thing. So you're in charge of the Navy, you're in charge of agriculture, you're in charge of foreign trade, and then you tell me what you think we should do. And then I'll make that decision based on your expert advice, instead of you trying to advise me on 26 different things. So that's the logic. And that's how modern democracies are structured as well. In the executive branch in almost every country is the same kind of structure. So Peter does a lot to improve his country. They're still woefully behind, but he does try. Catherine the Great is known for her support of territorial expansion. Russia is going to get a lot bigger towards Central Asia and eventually the Pacific under her control. People laughed at Russia for getting this territory. Why would you want it? Of course, in the third time period and the fourth, we start to discover oil, natural gas, many other minerals, etc., metals that make Russia a very wealthy nation today because of those discoveries. So Catherine, I don't think she's terribly enlightened, but she does definitely support the notion of absolutism. She rules with an iron fist, probably helping have her husband murdered. to be honest. So there you go. We also mentioned Frederick and Maria Theresa. They are tied together usually because both rule in Central Europe. Frederick the Great is the leader of a new state called Prussia. Not necessarily new, but a smaller state that will eventually become Germany. Maria Theresa leads the Habsburg family, which has been around for hundreds of years. Her father was worried that she would be attacked because she's a female. And so he had set up a few years before his death, creating the Pragmatic Sanction, all these different treaties and swaps with other leaders that they would not invade Austria upon his death and her ascension. However, he dies the same year the leader of Prussia dies. And so the new Prussian king, Frederick the Great, says, that's my dad's rule. I don't care. Let's go invade Austria. Let's get it. And we know that Austria and Prussia, even though having a lot in common, are rivals for a long, long time. And eventually we see victories by the Prussians, which makes Frederick the Great stand out. People give him a lot of street cred. However, the Austrians defend the vast majority of their territory, so Maria Theresa also gets influence. And they both go on to do other things. Frederick the Great is an enlightened absolutist. He supports religious toleration. He builds a synagogue in Berlin. He is going to free the serfs on his own land, and in that policy on royal lands, he's renowned by a lot of leaders. Hitler has a portrait of him over his desk during World War II. Napoleon steals his alarm clock when he invades Berlin in 1806. So there's a lot of adulation for Frederick and his policies. Maria Theresa rules for 40 plus years, has 17 children, 14 of whom become married to royal leaders all across the continent. She's also a great patron of the arts, including young Mozart. So they both do a lot of other things, but they're going to have conflict there. Now, this is what we call the War of Austrian Succession, which we don't care about much. Things aren't terribly settled, which leads to another war, and this is what you're getting in that balance of power in 3.6, called the 7 Years' War. In North America, the French and Indian War. And all you need to know is this. From 1756 to 63, so pretty much right in the middle of your time period, France and England fight all over the world. They fight in Canada, the American colonies, the Caribbean, Europe, and India, and Britain wins pretty much everywhere, establishing itself as the dominant global power. So right before the American Revolution, we see Great Britain as the global dominant power. All right, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, any questions there? All right, there's other things a little bit here and there, but we're not going to get too much into that. So that is essentially absolutism. Good? So most of Europe is absolutist. We have a few outliers in the Dutch and the English, but everybody's pretty much absolutist. So we go to Unit 4, which we'll do the first couple of these, and that is the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. So we'll do those two things. We'll stop for today. We'll pick up with the French Revolution and other developments on Wednesday's review. Friday's review is DBQ. So there'll be several of those sessions, as you saw, 20, 30 minutes, boom, boom, boom. Here's what's the same, here's what's different. And then I will give out a DBQ on Google Classroom Friday. And then it's due not this upcoming Sunday, but the following Sunday. So you have 10 days to do one 45-minute DBQ. Now, the sooner you do it, the sooner I can grade it. So if you want to strike while the iron's hot and do it next weekend, then you don't have any assignments for the next week. So feel free to do that if that's what you want. My plan right now is to get everybody 2 more DBQs. This one, a week for me to grade and comment with each of you. I'm going to do a rubric on Google Classroom so you can actually upload and see what I'm saying about your writing. And then you have 1 more, and then that's it. So pretty much we're going to do these multiple choice this week, multiple choice next week, 2 DBQs. That's it. Okay. So minimal work to get you what you need to do to get ready for your AP exam, and that's that. Cool. Okay. So the scientific revolution, we already started a little bit last week. We know that it's a revolution in science. It's based on empiricism, on data, on reliability of information, about trying to prove your hypotheses. 3 scientists are mentioned as required examples. We discussed last week Copernicus and Galileo because they're before 1648. The third one does most of his work after 1648, and that is Sir Isaac Newton. Can anyone give me one example of an accomplishment to science of Sir Isaac Newton?
Gravity. Discovered gravity.
Yep. How about another one? Surely you haven't forgotten all your physics.
Laws of motion.
Laws of motion from 3 of you. Good. Excellent. F equals ma, all that fun stuff. Great. He is the one, he helps invent calculus. He also discovers that white light is in fact not white, it's rather a rainbow, the concept of a prism, all that is going to come from Sir Isaac Newton. So major accomplishment there. And we know that we are going to basically try to take the ideas of a laboratory and apply them to everything in life. So can we know it? Can we prove it? We mentioned Rene Descartes last week. Can I truly know what I think I know? What's my evidence for that? And this will have many ramifications. Now, at the time, it doesn't change most people's lives. But there would have been no industrial revolution or probably no agricultural revolution without the scientific revolution. They build on each other. And then, of course, today, much of our world is based on technology. I've thought several times during the last couple of weeks that while this stinks, I'm certainly glad that it's now that this is happening. When I was in school, if this had happened, we've been screwed. No streaming. Oh, no Zoom, no FaceTime, no texting, no TikTok. My God, what would you have done? You've done nothing. All right, so it's at least, even though we're all bored to tears and ready for this to end, at least we have the ability to entertain ourselves for the most part in the current situation. So we're reaping the benefits of the scientific revolution as we speak, as you get to see my beautiful face on Zoom. So there you go. All right, then we move on to the Enlightenment, which is the final of what I call the four cousins, the building up of these major technological cultural movements that transform Western Europe from kind of crappy in the late 1300s, early 1400s to the world's dominant society in the 19th century. And so these four movements allow that to occur. Also, the fabulous wealth we gain from mercantilism, illicitly gained, by the way. So we mentioned intellectuals. Your study guide talks about Voltaire. Voltaire is prominent for his support of two major ideas: it's freedom of speech and freedom of religion, which were not common in his day. He gets kicked out of his own country multiple times for challenging the church and or the monarch. So we know there's a lot of people not liking the rules that are set forth. We know those are two of the five elements of our First Amendment, kind of the bedrock of our democratic beliefs. And that's a challenge, of course, but that's part of it. All right, I'm going to go turn off my dryer real quick because I think what it's doing is, since I haven't stopped it yet. So can anybody name another major concept of the Enlightenment? Another philosopher, another idea? If you don't remember whose idea it was, that's okay. But outside of freedom of speech and religion, what are some other major beliefs?
Isn't it like Jean-Jacques Rousseau?
What's he down with?
Oh, it was like the self...
General will. Is it general will?
Yeah, what does that mean, Taylor?
Is that like, oh no.
Wait. It's like everyone should want to succeed for the like best of the people, right? Like, isn't it like you should want to work hard and do well so everyone like...
Yeah, it's more from the leadership perspective. It's not democracy. I've told you many times I don't want to hear you use that word yet, but it's when making decisions, we should consult with the populace. Yeah, we should let their voice be heard, and then the informed will make the best decision. This is why the Electoral College is created. It's a product of the Enlightenment. None of the founding fathers wanted democracy. They don't want illiterate farmers voting. I've told you many times, in 1789, when Washington becomes the first president, 4% of Americans can vote. That's the standard thought of the day. The average person is illiterate, has never been educated, has no idea about what's important or what our values should be. And so it's best that it's almost like a nanny, like we are there to take care of them. That's the philosophy that they have, and that's the philosophy we have for a long time. As you may know, until 1910 in this country, senators are elected by state governments. The direct election of senators is barely over 100 years old, because it was thought the Senate would be a more refined body that would help keep our government's decisions from the rash ideas of the average person who got to vote. I don't know if that's true or not anymore, but that's at least the theory behind it. So again, reading the Constitutional Convention notes of Madison are pretty interesting, because it's not just here's what we want to do, it's why do we want to do it? And all that is wrapped up in the Enlightenment and its belief system. So that's good. Can I have another one or two, and then we'll move on?
Mary Wollstonecraft?
Yeah, what was her thing?
Feminism?
Yes, that women should be treated equally. How'd that go over, Quillen?
Yeah. Not very well. She was not respected.
No, she was not. So as always, sometimes we get caught up in a sweeping generalization. Women are treated for... No. The Enlightenment changed everything. No, 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 no. The Enlightenment dudes are pretty progressive. They're definitely what I would call liberal, bordering on radical. But very few of them are like, you know who should deserve equal rights? Women. Now, there's a couple, are utilitarians who believe the greatest good for the greatest number. Jeremy Bentham, his protege, John Stuart Mill, they're down with it, but most people, And y'all remember, you did research on an Enlightenment figure back in the fall, and most of them were not terribly interested in women having more opportunity. All right, it was a pretty misogynistic crowd, and it should have been trying to recreate their attitudes because that's what it was. That's the ideas of the time. Good. I'll take one more. I don't need the person's name if there's just an idea that we haven't talked about. All right, I will give you a name to help you out. How about John Locke? Logan?
Because he was the one I was thinking of earlier. I just don't know if I mentioned him or not. Isn't he the one who says that the government owes to give back to its people?
Kind of. He believes in what are called natural rights.
Okay.
Because they are natural, what cannot be done by your government?
They can't take them away from you.
Perfect. Good job. Do we remember what any of these are? Or maybe all three?
I do beach.
Life?
Oh.
Life,
Liberty,
liberty,
pursuit of
freedom.
Liberty?
Life, liberty, and
pursuit of happiness.
No,
Property.
that's the American version.
Property.
Property.
Property. Why didn't we say property in America?
It's slavery.
Slavery. That would have been contentious, so we just punt the ball down the field. We'll deal with it later. So, life, liberty, and property. Those things cannot be infringed upon, according to John Locke. He also writes extensively about religious toleration as well. This is in the 1680s, well before anybody else is agreeing that's a good idea. All right, does that make sense? Excuse me, does that make sense? So those are the broad strokes of the ideas. We're going to spread this through printed material. We know allowing more books to be printed allows more people to be educated. We're still not talking about anywhere near a majority. We're still probably 10, 15% literate, but it does help. We know that we have coffee houses and salons where people can get together and socialize, talk about these ideas. We recreated one of these back in the fall. So that's the broad strokes of how those ideas are in fact spread. Let me see if there's anything else I'm forgetting. Nah, I'm pretty good with that. So I'm going to stop right there. We're at about 45 minutes, of which at least 5 minutes is me talking about my washer and dryer. So that's good. We will continue.